Hello there, and welcome to the Terrace Scottish Football Podcast. My name is Craig Telfer, and joining me right now is my close associate, Shaughan McGuigan.
Hello there.
And you know what happens when the Cliff Richard and Russ Abbott of the Terrace get together. That is right, we are going to head to Barbados during a global pandemic. We'll pose for a photo with an elderly man who captured the national spirit, kill him, and then perhaps talk about some lower league Scottish football.
Captain Tom did kill a lot of local people while he was there, to be fair.
I mean, is that, are we... You can't say these things. You have to have some evidence to back it up.
So basically, when Captain Tom arrived it was Barbados, wasn't it?
Yes, that's right.
Yeah, so basically, as soon as he arrived, the deaths through COVID spiked within about a week or two. I mean, that is unusual.
That is unusual. I mean, there's a correlation of Captain Tom's arrival on the island and then the cases spiking. Who knows? Might have been Cliff Richard or Russ Abbott might have been the vectors for illness. We just don't know.
They in fairness, they may have brought it with them. Remember Russ Abbott? In fact, you probably won't remember, but Russ Abbott was like one of Britain's biggest stars in the 80s, which is incredible.
Was he the guy with the emu?
No,
okay, right. I think maybe I'm thinking of Russ Abbott. Maybe I'm thinking of was it Grant Russell, the sort of the chubby Australian fortune teller? Is that who I'm thinking of?
That was Russell Grant.
I got the names mixed up. Grant Russell's a former STV journalist. Russell
Yes.
Grant, yes. Right. So Russ Abbott, Russell Grant, easy enough to sort of get them mixed up.
So Russ Abbott was a kind of bottom of the barrel, like the kind of comedian you would see at a kind of busted flush pub, okay. I suppose. But for a good bit of the 80s, he was reasonably big, and then towards the end of his career, he started releasing singles and doing albums that were all terrible. However, they seem to do quite well.
Okay. It must be quite difficult though when tastes change and suddenly the opportunities for you dried up if you have been in the public consciousness for such a long time. It must be quite difficult to adjust, and I suppose if you're only way you've really known to make a living for decades is through entertainment, that must be quite difficult to try and move with the times. You look at Michael Barrymore. Yeah,
totally. I do think if you look at like comedy shows from the 80s, I struggle to see too much that's particularly funny about them, and then there probably was a change, but Russ Abbott is somebody who was caught in the crossfire, I suppose.
But listen, he got to travel to Barbados, so he's obviously doing all right. If he can go on holiday to Barbados, he's obviously got a couple of quid in his back pocket. So listen, listeners, if you're feeling a bit down, don't feel sorry for Russ Abbott. He doesn't need your tears.
Do you remember his big hit?
No, I don't.
Are you aware of his big song hit?
Sing it for me.
Oh, what an atmosphere. I love a party with a happy atmosphere. So let me take you there, 'cause you and I'll go dancing in the cool night air.
I've never heard that song in my life.
That's his big hit.
That was his big hit. Okay. Like you say, the 80s, very, very different time. Very, very different time. Yuppies. The rise of football hooliganism, Thatcher. Anyway, Shaughan and I are going to be back in business with our patented 3-game podcast. And you know when I say patented, don't make me tap that sign. We're going to be looking at one game from the Championship, another fixture from League One, and something else from League Two. We'll also be keeping up to date with everything that's going on with Stenhousemuir Football Club, of course. Now, Shaughan, there's a lot for us to get through, but just generally, how is everything going?
I'm very well, how are you?
Yeah, good, thank you. It's been a good week. On Monday, we're recording this on the Wednesday, so it's been quite jam-packed already. But on Monday, I had the opportunity to interview Lyndon Dykes at Lesser Hampden, to talk to him about his return to playing for Scotland after his injury. So great to see him. He'll be on the pitch on Thursday night against Poland, so that was a lot of fun. And then I was at a pop concert on Tuesday night with Robert Borthwick, obviously from the Terrace, and a friend of mine, Lorna, from work.
How's Lyndon?
Oh, brilliant! I in another lifetime, he and I would be friends.
I did so. As much as I said that I was absolutely fine when you asked how I was, I'll be honest. See, when I watched the interview with you and Lyndon Dykes, a real kind of a real kind of pang of jealousy that when you meet Lyndon Dykes, there was a bit of an embrace.
Yeah.
Like he did kind of reach out to you, kind of touch you on the arm. Or, yeah. So that was, I was quite jealous.
No, he's a nice guy. He's a nice guy. I think he's someone who is very at ease with himself. And when you find people that are at ease with themselves, very easy to talk to and have a laugh with. You know, where we're discussing hairstyles, discussing what if he's got anything he can teach Cristiano Ronaldo when the pair meet on Sunday when Portugal play Scotland.
In terms of footballers you've now worked with, has Lyndon Dykes now overtaken Colin Henry in terms of the amount of times that you've worked with him? Or is Colin Henry still in the lead?
I think Lyndon Dykes, that's 3 times now. I've done stuff with him for Scotland Business Club, for Scotland HQ, and for the social media there prior to the game. Colin Henry, they're tied. They're actually tied. But I fully expect Colin Henry to roar back into the league at some point in the future. He's really good company, Colin Henry. He's a good laugh. Just loves being a professional Scotland fan.
Yeah, he's absolutely fine, and his hair is getting better.
Was it bad previously?
Well, he's had a hair transplant. It is getting better.
All right, I'm sure there was an episode of View from the Terrace up in Inverness where he wanted to. He asked if he could wear a cap during it, and I think we were asked, well, we'd prefer it if you didn't, and thankfully acquiesced to our wishes.
I was really worried that it was going to be a bloody mess. But it was fine. It was just I suppose the hair was sprouting. I think that's why he wanted to keep it literally under cap.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but I find it I think it's quite funny to make fun of like bald people. I mean, we make fun of Joel Sked an awful lot. We talk about Ian Russell's ghastly hair transplant debacle a lot of the time. All those bald guys turned up at the Rock to shake their fists really angrily at him. But when it comes to a Scotland captain, I can't. I'm not going to admonish him. Put it that way.
And that's fair enough.
That's fair enough. Well, Shaughan, before we take a look at our featured match at the Championship, we recorded a Patreon podcast last week, and it was titled basically "What on Earth is Going On at Raith Rovers." We now know what is going on at Raith Rovers because after 30 days, they finally appointed a replacement for Ian Murray. And their new manager is Neil Collins. He played with Queen's Park in Dumbarton before moving to England for a long period. He's managerial spells with the Tampa Bay Rowdies. And they're, of course, now managed by Robbie Neilson. And he was last at Barnsley before leaving them in April. He is the new man at Starks Park. What are your thoughts on that?
I suppose first I'm just relieved that Raith have somebody in place.
Just the way you went like that to kick that off.
I'm just relieved. I think that it's quite funny that Raith have, after I suppose sacking a manager after one league game, I think it's quite funny that they've appointed a manager who was sacked by Barnsley with one league game remaining, and it was quite interesting. It's quite interesting going on the Barnsley forum. Kind of going backwards and looking at what they thought of the dismissal, and ultimately the discussion was very, very similar. So obviously Raith fans were like, "Is this correct that you would sack Ian Murray in this position?" Very similar discussion with Barnsley fans in terms of sitting fifth in the table. I think at the time were in a wee bit of poor form, so they could have slipped out the playoff positions if they'd lost their last game. I think they did anyway, but retained their playoff spot. But there was just this big discussion about, well, is that right? Like, ultimately, we are in the playoffs, which is kind of where we would expect to be. Why are we getting rid of Neil Collins? What I think might have been a wee bit more definitive than you had with Ian Murray at Raith was, I think some Barnsley fans were quite happy with that. Okay. With that sacking, but more to do with the style of play. I think it seemed like it was reasonably not the most aesthetically pleasing style of football, I suppose. However, in terms of Collins' CV, seemed to do quite well in America. In terms of Barnsley, probably did what he was expected to do in terms of get him to I appreciate he was sacked before the playoffs could occur, but he was in the playoff positions when he was dismissed. So it doesn't feel like there is a a failure on his CV so far. And ultimately, like every single name that has been linked with the Rovers job so far, it's quite hard to know what to make of them, because ultimately we don't know too much about them. Mm-hmm. So I suppose Neil Collins will very much be a kind of wait and see, but I suppose I'm fine with the appointment, and I think every other Raith Rovers fan is essentially of the same thought, I suppose.
I suppose it's not so much a question mark, because I know that Rovers, they were apparently very keen on Rhys McCabe at Ayr Dronings, very keen on Scott Brown at Ayr United, very close to appointing David Linfield of Healy in Northern Ireland, David Healy of Linfield in Northern Ireland, and being the fourth choice for the job, third or fourth choice, you wonder if you what you come into the club like when you knew that I'm not the number one pick for this role. But by the same token, somebody needs to manage the club. So you've got a shortlist and you work your way down. So
there was a suggestion when you were looking at his interview last night, there was a suggestion that Raith had actually already approached him, and he had maybe asked him to wait and see. Then they'd had the approach, because bear in mind, like, David Healy had applied for the job. So admittedly, I'm kind of reading between the lines, and I could be totally wrong. And actually, maybe the kind of Andy Barrowman and the board are maybe giving us information when it's not necessarily the case. But they were of the suggestion that Neil Collins was always somebody who they were keen on. The thing about Collins is he's got a wife and 4 kids. So moving them up from America to Barnsley to Kirkcaldy, feels like a huge decision. And I do wonder if maybe they'd spoken to him, he felt the job wasn't right for him, then David Healy came in, that fell through, and then they maybe went back to Collins and offered him, it's a 3-year deal. Mm-hmm. That feels like a long contract. So I wonder if they not necessarily gave him more money, but maybe gave him an additional year to his contract that was enough to tempt him. So you're right, maybe he is the second choice or the third choice. I'm not entirely sure he is, but regardless, I'm sure that most managers, when they turn up at a club, it's not as if they're all first choice. So I don't think that necessarily comes into it.
Who is his first game against? Are you playing in the Trust Trophy this weekend?
So they have Ayr United in the Trust Trophy this weekend, and then Dunfermline the week after. So a very straightforward start to proceedings. We will certainly, I really don't care about the Challenge Cup, to be honest. We've got Falkirk on Saturday. I'm not going to. I can't be bothered. You're not going?
No. It's for a number of reasons. It's fact that it's a second tier competition. I don't think people really take it seriously until you get to the semi-finals, when you've actually got a chance of winning it. It's certainly very low down on our list of priorities. I think the fact that we played Falkirk very recently in the League Cup and were absolutely smashed by them, lost that game 4-0, and it's 20 quid to go as well, and it just feels like it's just not appealing. No, it doesn't appeal to me. What I'm doing instead, I'm going to go and see Christy Aitchison instead. Have you met Christy yet?
No, but I've heard a lot of good things about him.
So I'm going through to Edinburgh to catch up with him. So I'll look forward to that.
The only thing I would say to kind of beware in situations like that is I didn't go to the Rangers Raith Rovers Scottish Cup tie where Christian Naddy scored the winner.
Ah, right, okay.
And I bitterly regret it. So just be aware of that.
No. I'm very much aware that something incredible could happen here. However, it's not the Scottish Cup. See, if it was the Scottish Cup, I would have gone to it. I think just in terms of my hierarchy of competitions, the league, then the Scottish Cup, then the League Cup, then the Challenge Cup. I think that's the way it works there. So the fact that it's who cares? The Scottish Cup's something different. I think the Scottish Cup's a really cool tournament. That's a competition I really look forward to. So yeah,
I look forward to Stenny beating Falkirk in the Challenge Cup on Saturday, and you reacting to it very calmly.
Oh no! I will have a big pint of rum or something like that. But anyway, let's get on. We've been talking too long about feelings. Let's talk about our feature game in the Championship. And Shaughan, this is the Glasgow derby. Oh, oi, Telfer. We already spoke about Celtic and Rangers on Monday's show. Are you addled with the Alzheimer's? And I would say, hold your horses. We're going to be talking about the city's cuddly alternative. This is Partick Thistle against Queen's Park. The Jags against the Spiders. The North against the South. And it finished 3-0 to Chris Doolan's side, with all 3 goals coming directly or indirectly from set pieces. Harry Milne put Thistle ahead after 11 minutes with a header. Aidan Fitzpatrick grabbed a second midway through the second half with a deflected shot from 20 yards, and Xander McKenzie netted his first goal for the club at the death to put the tin lid in it. And I've got to say, this was a very, very nice goal as well. Both sides in 4 points. Thistle are in 5th place. Queen's Park are in 6th. Shaughan, I'm going to, like the scene from Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom with chilled monkey brains, I want to cut off the top of your head and scoop out your thoughts on Partick Thistle 3, Queen's Park 0.
So it's funny because Partick Thistle, I believe, do highlights, but they're behind the paywall.
Yes.
So the highlights I watched were obviously Queen's Park's. Mm-hmm. And as much as I do think that most teams in the lower leagues give a reasonably good, fair, balanced perspective in terms of the highlights, everything I had read about this game was that Queen's Park were stinking and Partick Thistle were quite good. But when I watched Queen's Park's highlights, it felt like Queen's Park had a lot of kind of strong moments.
Do you reckon?
In this game?
It's certainly not the impression that I got from this one. I thought that it was a very... I mean, the only interesting thing that happened was when Miles Roberts handled the ball outside the box.
Yes.
And I suppose, actually, it's quite interesting because there's a game we're going to be talking about it later on when a goalkeeper handles the ball outside the boxes. You don't see it very often, but to see it happening in the same weekend is quite something. But no, I just thought this was quite straightforward for Partick Thistle going by the highlights. It's Queen's Park were badly deficient at defending set pieces, defending balls into the box, and then defending the subsequent if the ball's cleared, like defending with that. Subsequently saw that with the goals from Fitzpatrick and McKenzie, and I think that the 3-0 scoreline seemed fair for what I saw.
I mean, based on everything I've read, I totally agree, and I think this was more of what we expected from Partick Thistle when the season began, and I suppose maybe more of what we expected from Queen's Park when we looked at their squad. I do think, in terms of Queen's Park, like remember we used to like absolutely lambast Queen's Park last season in terms of how they were approaching games, chucking on like literal school children every week, and they've moved away from that, but there is still maybe a precociousness about their squad, and I think when you start to pull out, there's experienced players there and good players there, but I think when you start to maybe peel away one or two of them, like Cammy Kerr didn't play on Saturday, and I think when you do things like that, you start to notice their absence, and I do think that Saturday was an example of that. Yeah,
I think that was something that Callum Davidson said in his post-match interview. He actually thought the scoreline was quite harsh in Queen's Park, but he did acknowledge that the set pieces were their downfall. And he said they're missing some key players. You mentioned Cammy Kerr there. Will Tizard was missing him. No, he's quite a young guy, but he's certainly played quite a lot over the last 2 seasons. Callum Ferry, of course, was missing after another goalkeeper handling the ball outside his box. The last week we talked about that against Airdrie. But yeah, I thought for this, it's like Thistle they seemed Queen's Park seemed quite careless. That's what I'm going to try and say. There was for one instance, there was a really poor throw-in midway through I think it was like the first half that allowed James Lyon to shoot from distance. And it's just that any time that I think the only really decent bit of play they had was Josh Scott picked up the ball on inside the half, made a really, really nice run, took a couple of players out of the game and teed up Dom Thomas, but his shot was like straight at Roberts and very easy for him to save. That was the thing that was as good as it got for Queen's Park. It's funny you talk about kind of slack or careless play. Was it just before the second goal? I think Zach Rudden seemed like really far back for whatever reason. It was maybe 40 yards from his own goal. Then just kind of turned around and kind of played it straight into I don't even know who he played it into the path of, but it almost led to Partick Thistle second. And you're right, there was a kind of slackness about Queen's Park in general that I suppose that they beat Airdrie recently, and you think, oh, well, actually Queen's Park might be okay, but like other than that, they haven't really looked okay. So maybe this was more what
what Queen's Park just are this season, I suppose.
Well, they have to be a lot better than they were in terms of defending set pieces. That's where the goals came from. But if you listen to Michael McIndoe, set pieces are easily fixable, according to the Edinburgh City manager. So, Callum Davidson, if you're listening, give Mr. McIndoe a bell. He'll be able to tell you where you're going wrong and how to fix it. But I think the first one, I found this one really interesting because it's Harry Milne. Effectively, the ball's tossed into the box from the corner and he just runs onto it. I think it's Josh Scott that is marking him and lets him go. But they had a string of players along the 6-yard box. I think they were like doing some zonal marking there. And I don't want to get into debates about like man marking versus zonal marking because, to be honest, I don't know enough about it. But when you saw that goal there and nobody really picking him up or him wriggling away from Scott so easily, that just seemed like a really cheap goal to give away, especially 11 minutes into the game, especially from someone like Harry Milne, who, if you're going through that Partick Thistle team, he's not the most obvious danger from set pieces and corners.
I think it's just what happens when you have, I think it was a back five, maybe for Queen's Park, or a back three that becomes a back five. And there isn't that much like experience in there. Like Nicola Oyedewo, I suppose they got fed Inverness.
Yeah.
Everybody else felt like a reasonably young player that maybe isn't quite up to the rigours of that level just now. But it was just a poorly defended corner.
Yeah, the second goal as well. I think this was what we talked about, slackness and not being switched on. It's a short corner and the ball's worked towards the edge of the penalty area, and there is a great deal of fortune in it because Fitzpatrick's pot shot, I think Udger sticks a leg out and it just whacks off his leg and completely takes Jack Wills out of the game, and it's into the net. And what I liked about this one is that the crowd are cheering before the ball's even crossed the line. I think they see as soon as it hits off Udger and it completely warps the trajectory, that's hitting the back of the net.
I wasn't entirely sure because if they were cheering before it hit the back of the net because they knew it was going in, or just because the sound wasn't necessarily synced particularly correctly.
I thought that as well, but I was going to give the Thistle fans the benefit of the doubt there. I mean,
very knowledgeable group of fans.
If that goal had a degree of fortune about it, like Xander McKenzie's goal is really, really good. This is same thing. It's a corner kick. It's cleared to the edge of the area, but the finish is exquisite. It's like a side-footed volley that I think to hit the ball as hard and as accurate as that with your instep on the volley, that's a great deal of technique. And I mean, what a way to score your first. I think it's his first professional goal.
It wasn't a typical finish, like from that distance to kind of side foot it, to get the accuracy, to get the kind of pace into it. Like I wasn't entirely sure that Jack Wills in the Queen's Park goal had the best game, but regardless, even if Ferry had been in it, I don't think he would have stopped that one.
No, it was a great finish, and they had one, I think Terry Ablade, if I've pronounced that, Ablade, if I've pronounced that correctly, he had a header late on, but it was ruled offside. He just didn't get out quickly enough when the ball was put back in. But again, that was another one from a corner kick that they, I suppose you could say they did defend that one well because they all moved out when the ball was headed back in, and Ablade was ruled offside. But you think we've learned anything from these two sides after this game?
It'll be interesting to see if... It was interesting to read Partick Thistle fans' comments before this game in terms of they didn't seem to be panicking. But bear in mind, I think everybody thought that Partick Thistle would be challenging for maybe even the title, never mind the playoffs this season. I wasn't overly impressed with them at Starts Back at all a couple of weeks ago. They certainly looked much better against Queen's Park. Harry Milne, I thought, was very important in terms of this victory, and I suppose it's a player who we thought might have been a wee bit higher up the food chain than because of how good he was a season or two ago. So maybe Chris Doolan is just starting to get like a wee tune out of players that you would expect them to get, I suppose. But I don't know. It's hard to gauge too much after one game because ultimately Partick Thistle have been reasonably disappointing, and Queen's Park in terms of this game, I'm not sure about Queen's Park. I still expect them to be at the kind of bottom 3 or 4 positions for the championship this season.
I'll take your Partick Thistle point and then your Queen's Park point. First, I think with Harry Milne, it's interesting you've picked up on him because he looked really good. Some really good rampaging runs down that left flank is what you've come to expect from him. And I think that seemed a bit subdued at points last season. I think the season previously, the 22-23 season where Queen's Park got to the playoff final and lost out to Ross County, he was excellent in that run. Same with the guys like Jack McMillan and Brian Graham. All these guys had really strong performances over that latter part of the season, and it felt as though that it was a matter of time before Harry Milne would be moving up and playing in the Premiership. But I think last season, a bit more subdued. I think he signed a contract extension as well with us, and hopefully he can get back to his best because he's a superlative fullback, and at his best, beg your pardon, he's probably too good for the Championship.
Yeah, agreed. And I think when you go back maybe 2 years to when that Partick Thistle team seemed so exciting, you had Harry Milne down one side and Jack McMillan down the other. Now, Casper Nielsen, don't know too much about, but he seemed to have a good game on the right-hand side for this one. Kyle Turner, again, you expect a lot. Logan Chalmers, kind of to the right-hand side of Turner, is somebody who... This feels like a really key season for him in terms of a lot of Ayr fans thought that he was somebody they would like to keep on. Mm-hmm. I think there was a number of Ayr fans that thought he blew hot and cold, and I would imagine that Scott Brown was very much of that opinion as well, because I'd got the impression that Scott Brown didn't really want to kind of keep him around. So this feels like a key season again for Logan Chalmers. I am surprised at how Partick Thistle have started the season. It'll be interesting to see how they continue in terms of this one. They were just far too good for Queen's Park, I suppose. Yeah,
and in terms of Queen's Park, there's an interesting thing pointed out in Callum Davison's post-match interview. The guy that was interviewing said that there was only two players. When Queen's Park and Partick Thistle met back in January, there were only two players in Queen's Park's starting 11 on Saturday there who played in that fixture back then. So yes, I know that guys like Will Tizard, Callum Ferry, for instance, they were out missing. They would have probably started this game. But Queen's Park really are a team in transition. They're still trying to adjust from that failed Robin Veldman experiment when, as you say, it was like school kiddies that were given a game, and it was just the team was, I think it was like Dom Thomas and a bunch of boys. It was like something like Rufio from Hook.
The attitude of transition, I'm still not entirely sure that they're a team that's quite good enough. So I know Zach Rudden started the season quite well. Need
someone up front with him. I think that's
yes. He's very much somebody who will not necessarily excel, but certainly be a lot better if you can get players in and around him. And I do dislike that phrase. I suppose Dom Thomas has done that to a degree. Whether the other player like Roddy McGregor has kind of started the season okay, like he can get in and support. Sean Welsh will probably miss a lot of the season through injury. I know Jack Turner's kind of played in midfield. That doesn't feel good enough if you have a back line that is inexperienced. So I still expect Queen's Park to be towards the lower end of the table than challenge for a playoff spot.
Yeah, the other thing I don't understand is Jack Thompson, why you'd play him at centre back. I know it's needs must with him, but surely any time I've seen him play in central midfield, the guy looks class, just like a bit of a wrecking ball. Like, you know that is at the Pamplona Festival where they just like smack a bull's arse and send it running down a street. That's what Jack Thompson looks like when he's playing, but I mean that in a good way, where he just like charges around the pitch, he wins the ball, he's aggressive with and without possession, and I just think that it's a waste having him in the centre back. So beef up the centre backs, get him into the middle of the park to cause a bit of chaos, and sign a striker as well to give Zach Rudden someone to play off.
I thought you were about to start talking about throwing tomatoes at each other, and I wasn't entirely sure how that would fit in at all.
Well, that's the one thing. Could you imagine you're just chucking tomatoes at each other, and then a bull turns up? There's too much going on there at the one time. Did they kill the bull at the end?
Oh, I don't know. I thought Pamplona was So is Pamplona when bulls run at you? That's not tomatoes at all.
I don't know. Listen, I've only ever been to Spain twice, I think.
Were bulls or tomatoes involved?
Oh goodness me, no! I don't like tomatoes, and I think it's cruel what they do to those bulls. So I don't take any part in it. We'll have a bonus, Shaughan, as we tend to do when we're doing our patented 3-game roundups. It is patented, don't copy us. But there are other things that happen in the Championship that are perhaps worth talking about. There's interesting stuff actually that's happened in the division, in all 3 divisions over the past weekend. Did you watch Dougie Imrie's post-match interview after Greenock Morton's 3-2 defeat to Falkirk, perchance?
Yes, he was very keen to blame the referee for their 3-2 defeat.
Oh my goodness, yeah. I mean, for those who don't know what happened there, his side were leading 2-0 but ended up losing the game 3-2. And the match turned on I think it's fair to say it's a questionable, debatable penalty decision where Dylan Tate went down in the box under some pressure, and believe me, there's a lot of inverted commas there, some pressure from Zach Delaney, and the referee Graham Granger awarded a penalty. In his post-match interview, Imrie said one guy killed the game today, and that was the referee. Millions of fouls he got wrong today, and a word that I haven't heard in a number of years, he said flabbergasted, which I think is quite funny, that word, sort of this old Victorian word coming from someone like Dougie Imrie. But just we'll break that into 2, Shaughan. First of all, what did you think of the penalty award?
I thought it was soft, but I could see why the referee gave it.
Yeah,
he did have a hold of his jersey.
Yeah,
and it happened right in front of him. And as much as Tate maybe made the most of it, I didn't necessarily have an issue with it.
Yeah, that's kind of what I thought. I think it was a soft penalty, but it probably was a penalty. And then, what did you think of Dougie Imrie's comments?
I struggle to believe that the referee gave millions of free kicks.
Yeah, I mean, there's probably about 15, 16 happen per game. I reckon Graham Granger could referee until he's 204 and still would never blow for millions of fouls in that entire period.
I'd very rarely get kind of worked up about referees. In fairness, on Saturday I had to put up with Colin Stephen.
Oh,
there was a point on Saturday where Callum Smith was sent clear. It was the very last minute of the first half. Callum Smith was sent clear. He kind of sprinted from his own half. It was a very long ball. And although he maybe had 45 yards to travel, he just had to keep it a beat. And Colin Stephen blew for half time. And do you know something? That was probably the right decision. And that's the thing about referees. They absolutely get far more decisions correct than they do wrong. But I don't know what it is about Colin Stephen. I dislike so much about him. It's his hair. It's the fact that he pulls up his shorts to just under his armpits. There's so much I dislike about him. So I struggle to get too worked up about the referee at the Morton Falkirk game when I have to put up with Colin Stephen.
Some people pay attention to the referees. I honestly
I don't normally. I don't normally. You're right.
Don't want to pay attention to them. I just think that I always think it's a hard job. I never like criticising referees. That's why I don't do it, because I do honestly believe that things even themselves out. So I was reading Pine Bovril, and there was some Clyde fans were complaining about referees who think they've got it in for Clyde. Conspiracy. I don't think the referees care all that much about Clyde, if we're being honest.
Imagine you go through. I don't know how long it takes to go through referee school. I would imagine it takes a long time, a year or two, for example, and suddenly you have a decent career in front of yourself. Imagine being a referee that thinks, right, I don't like Annan, so I'm going to potentially throw away my blossoming career to give more free kicks against Annan than is necessary. That can't possibly be the case.
Well, there was just on that. So I was at the Annan Stenhousemuir game at the weekend. There, we'll come on and maybe talk about that in a wee bit. There's a funny moment. You know how they've brought this initiative in where the captain, only the referee can speak to the captain, or the captains can speak to the referee.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a funny bit there where Willie Gibson, who is an athletics player manager, was given the referee jip. the referee goes over to Tam Muir, who's the Annan captain, and tells him, "Listen, you need to get a grip on him." So Tam Muir has to sort of go over to his manager and sort of just very say, "Listen, can you calm it down a bit, please?" They're just very funny. Just there's that structure and that power imbalance, and trying to pass that on. But Shaughan, we will drop into League One. There's some pretty big games on last weekend. A number we could have focused on, but we have selected Dumbarton 2, Kelty Hearts 2. And Mark Durnan was the hero for the Suns, scoring 2 equalisers, the second of which came in the 89th minute. And he cancelled out goals from Luke McCarville. Really nice goal, actually, from Luke McCarville, and a good finish from Craig Johnson. The stalemate now is Dumbarton's 5th consecutive draw. They're in 8th place with 5 points. But Kelty top the table with 9. They are still unbeaten in League One so far this season. Shaughan, like the scene in Hannibal where Anthony Hopkins is cooking the brains of Ray Liotta, I want to cook your brains and I want to taste what your thoughts on Dumbarton 2, Kelty Hearts 2.
I like the fact that Dumbarton have kind of picked up the baton that Stenny had in the kind of final quarter of League Two,
yes,
where they just think that they can get to just draw every game and escape relegation from by picking up 36 points. Dumbarton seem like a weird team. Like they can be both good and inept in the same kind of 90 minutes. In terms of Kelty Hearts, I don't know what to make of them. Like with every week that goes by, it's impossible not to think that maybe they're actually quite good. Like I didn't see this coming. I went to Queen's Park, Kelty in the League Cup, and I thought Kelty looked dreadful. But in terms of the highlights, I thought Kelty were the better team over the piece. And I know Michael Tidser was he kind of alluded to the fact that maybe a draw was fine, but then was bemoaning the fact that they lost 2 goals from set pieces. But no, I like watching Dumbarton. I am impressed by Kelty, I suppose.
It very much looked like this was 2 points chucked away for Kelty Hearts based on the number of chances that they created. They created actually quite a lot of chances. Some combination of like last ditch defending, good goalkeeping, poor finishing, and then the goal they lost as well. Like Rory Adams just coming for the corner kick at the end and just like sailing like over the top of him through his hands, and Durnan's just... Both goals actually were really simple for Mark Durnan to score, so that would be the big disappointment. But I thought on another day, in fact, I think if this match was replayed 9 times out of 10, Kelty Hearts would have won it based on the chances they had. So it really feels like it was 2 points chucked away there. I think one of the problems that I think that they've got at the moment is I think Michael Miller's struggling a wee bit. I think he looked quite leggy going by these highlights, and it seemed to be like any time Kelty were on the attack, I'm not sure if they targeted him or not. I think Michael Miller's a good player, but I don't think central defence is his best position. I think he's a good fullback, a good like defensive fullback. He's good in central midfield. I think if you play him as part of a 3-man midfield, you put him in the double pivot, I think he can operate it well there. But he's never struck me as someone who would play at centre back for a prolonged period. But I think it's obviously needs must at Dumbarton. But you could see for the first goal, for instance, and I know this is that he was outside the box. This isn't necessarily like an issue a centre back would have. But Luke McCarville just a lot faster than him and was just able to take the ball by him. And there was a bit as well, where have I got my notes here? Yeah, it's where Scott Williamson had a shot straight at Brett Long, and he's got a touch. He was able to take it away from Miller, and it just looked as though he seemed a wee bit unsure of himself in that position. I think that's something that Dumbarton need to look at, because he looks very much like a stopgap playing there at the moment.
Yeah, absolutely. And I suppose they had... I know there's questions about Lennon Gallagher when he first came in last season on loan, but I know they were...
Other way round.
Gallagher Lennon.
Aye.
In terms of last season during his loan spell. I think they were quite keen to get him back. A, because he'd done quite well last term eventually, and B, because he can play centre half. But they are absolutely desperate for a kind of central defender. And that, for a team that's come from League Two, I think they have enough about them. But you also, like, that's 5 draws now. So if they go out in game 6 and win, you're like, right, maybe they can be off and running here. But it kind of feels like they're on a knife edge, I suppose. That's maybe not quite the right term. But if they lose the next game, for example, then maybe you start to think, actually, Dumbarton might be in a wee bit of bother here. Because I don't think League One, quality-wise, I don't think it's the greatest league in the world. I think that would be safe to say. But I also think that there is a lot between the teams. But they're definitely crying out for kind of reinforcements defensively.
Yeah. But I suppose as Dumbarton, we should probably highlight the reason they did look a bit defensively suspect, and that was because of just how good Kelty were. I mean, that first goal, for instance, Luke McCarville, a player who I didn't know that much about. I think they signed him from Cumbernauld Colts, and he's one of a handful of players that have been playing in the Lowland League and have taken the step up and done very well with it. But he picks up the ball just inside the Dumbarton half, and it's a really just the pace, the body swerve as well to take Miller out of the game. And on top of that as well, Craig McGuffey's coming over to cover, and he cuts back inside before finishing from close range. Really, really, really nice goal.
Aye, a great goal. And Tidser said afterwards that he has basically been saying to McCarville that he wants him to kind of improve on his finishing, I suppose. And it was a great finish. Not necessarily the greatest defensive performance from Dumbarton, but in terms of the goal in general and the finish, a great goal.
Yeah, and I think that's something as well you'll get a lot from Kelty. And again, one of the reasons that Dumbarton looked a bit suspect was because of the energy that you're getting from those two attackers. I think that something that I noticed when they played Stenhousemuir on the second game of the season, like Craig Johnson and Scott Williamson up front, might not necessarily be the most technically accomplished players, but they run and they're really aggressive with their pressing. And you could see that there was a chance that they created. We mentioned it there, the chance that Scott Williamson had. But that's like Durnan is sort of ambling to close down a ball that's been punted into the channel. And Johnson just hares after him, and it's just through sheer endeavour that he's able to hook the ball away from him in the byline and play it into the box for Williamson. And it's, as we mentioned there, it's a nice wee jink in onto his other foot and to get the shot there. It's a good stop from Brett Long. But when you've got guys like that playing up front for you who can unsettle defences, big boys, big aggressive boys, then that's certainly a boon. And we saw this year.
And quick as well. If you can, I know it sounds like a very, very basic thing. We mentioned it before, but if you can do things well, and you can do things well at pace, then you're always going to do very well, especially in League One or League Two or whatever. And I was probably guilty of maybe underestimated Craig Johnson. And I remember when we discussed Kelty Hearts and what we expect from them. I thought that was a position that they were lacking. But actually, when you have players up front who are quick and their movement's good, and you have a player behind them, and Scott Allen, who set up the second goal, I thought his through ball was excellent. You can kind of understand why Kelty are doing quite well. I suppose the concern would be from a Kelty perspective that I think Scott Allen, they break his wrist.
Yeah, I'd heard that. You think he's going to be out for about 10 weeks or something like that?
Yeah, and I feel that he's been quite reasonably important, certainly over the kind of first 4 or 5 weeks of this season. So interesting to see how Kelty cope with his omission.
Yeah, I suppose that for Kelty, he mentioned it's a really nice goal, really nice through ball to Craig Johnson to finish through the legs of Brett Long. But as good as the goals were from McCarville and Johnson, undone by the 2 goals from Mark Durnan. And I think that if you kind of look through the constituent parts of that Kelty team, there's a lot to like about them, but you can't concede goals like that because they were 2 really, really poor goals to lose.
But was it the first one or the second one where Adams just appears to be just wandering about, literally wandering about like a character from The Sims?
It looked like I think that was the second one where he came out and it just breezed through him. But I think the first one, Durnan seems to head it onto his toes rather than head it in front of him. He headers it really aggressively down the way, and I think the ball seems to hit off him and go into the net. I've never seen the behind the goals angle and thinking, oh, he's lucky. He's lucky with that one there.
So not great, but I think what Kelty do have going for them, as does every single team in League One, is that I think there was an anticipation that a Queen's Park or Cooney South would be a team that would ultimately be far too good for anybody else. It feels like there is not much between any team in this division. So maybe there is a chance for Kelty to do something that we did not anticipate.
Well, having been to 5 games now in League One, watching Stenny, Kelty are the best team that I've seen Stenny play against. I thought they largely outmatched them. I think we spoke about guys like Michael Tidser playing, and I think Michael Tidser plays, as I said, he plays like with a wee force field around him that you just can't quite get the ball off him, and he's always just got the time and space to pick his passes. Alan has, obviously, I hope he's back to his best after his wrist injury, but Alan has acquitted to the division quite well as well. Not necessarily someone who's going to grab a game by the scruff of the neck, but someone who, when he is involved, and I think that the way that they've accommodated him, they play like a midfield diamond with him just on the tip, so he's involved, but he's not involved at the same time, if you know what I mean. Mm-hmm. It's a good way to get him playing where he's not really having to do any heavy lifting, and he's looked good when he does get in the ball, as we saw there. Like he does contribute. I mean, there he's got a goal against Stenny. He scored the opening goal against Arbroath at the weekend. There's an assist there, so he is making a big contribution to what Kelty are looking to do there. And in terms of the rest of the division, there's been real peaks and troughs. There's not like one out. Kelty were good, but not in a way that makes you go like, oof, they look really impressive. But in a way, I think that just because there's not an outstanding, just because all the teams can beat everyone else, people say that's like a lack of quality. I don't know, man. I think the division, like, I'm enjoying it. I'm enjoying it so far.
So in terms of that quality point that you made, I do think it might be one of the. And I don't like saying this. I do think it might be like one of the poorest quality League Ones we've had in some time, but only because of the teams has left it. So like Falkirk were quite good last season. Hamilton were a very good team for League One. Nobody of that standard has replaced them. So I do think that it has brought the pack far closer together.
There's no Edinburgh City as well.
Exactly, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. Like you could have an exciting horse race without anybody being a particularly good horse, if that makes sense.
No, I know what you mean. Yeah, just slow horses, all sort of like running into each other, like dodge them.
That'd be exciting.
You know, like a demolition derby. That
demolition
kind of
derby, surely.
Yeah, sorry. As soon as I said derby, I thought, fucking shut up, Tex. But no, good one. But I do find it interesting. Do you think Kelty Hearts can keep this momentum up? I mean, that's 5 games, 2 wins, 3 draws. I do. And the reason I think that is not necessarily because that Kelty are better than I thought they were, but the teams that I anticipated to be the kind of top 2 or 3 in that league are not as good as I thought they were. So yes, I do wonder if they could continue this promotion push. Yeah, and I think Dumbarton need to be better. I think the defence, like Miller and Durnan, there's another bit as well. I've got down my notes here for that Craig Johnson goal. I've written down here, Mark Durnan looked like he was running barefooted outside, and he just looked slow, and that's it. And that's where you need guys like Finlay Gray and Mohamed Niang in front of them to protect them. And I don't necessarily think the pair of them offered much protection.
No, and I agree. But I do think that Dumbarton could be a weird team, and whether it's to do with how whether it's to do with how that they're set up, whether it's to do with the kind of substitutions or whatever, the fact that every single game they haven't been out of their depth. They've given the fact that they've drawn 5 games, but almost in every single game they've been both bad in one half and good the other. I still think that bodes well, but in terms of what happens next, I suspect if they don't get a win soon, then they will become detached.
Yeah, it was just when Stevie Farrell thought he got all the fans back on side. Oh, they've just been biding their time to tell him they hate him as he's walking off the pitch. Little bonus, Shaughan, another game that's perhaps worthwhile talking about very briefly was Stenhousemuir 5, Annan Athletic 1, with Blair Alston getting his first, second and third goals for the club. He scored a second half hat-trick in the space of 7 minutes. Remarkable stuff at Oakville.
Are you starting to warm to the fact that maybe Blair Olsen is okay?
He's been fine. He's been fine so far for Stenhousemuir, yeah. And I think that you'd probably say he's like a poor man's Scott Allen. You could basically just copy and paste what you said about Scott Allen for Kelty. You could say that for Alston, whereas he's not necessarily going to dominate games, but he'll get stuck in, he'll run around, he'll put the hard yards in, and when he's on the ball, he'll do quality stuff. You saw that with his finishes for his first and second goals. It was the first goal was a cross into the box from Ross Meakin, and I think most players would have just swung a leg at it first time, but he controlled the ball and it just like killed it dead and put it in front of him and was able to finish there from close range while defenders were all sliding back to try and recover the situation. His second goal, it was like Annan just couldn't clear the ball properly, and the ball was punted up into there and came down. He was able to, I think, take it on his toes. There might have been a handball in there, but take it on his toes, turn inside the box, shift it onto his other foot and finish under Jamie Smith. And the third goal and the final goal was from the penalty spot, but it was melted. I think Smith didn't have much chance getting it.
And what about, I suppose, what about like both teams' fortunes? Because I think if you go back a couple of weeks, you were thinking, oh, maybe Stenny are going to struggle in League One. Maybe it could be a difficult campaign for them. And maybe Annan could be similar to Kelty Hearts, I suppose, in terms of how they started the campaign. It almost feels like that based on Saturday, which is probably a silly thing to say because it's just 90 minutes, but maybe that's reversed. That maybe Stenny could have the good campaign and maybe Annan are going to have the season that we thought they might have.
Well, Stenhousemuir have been excellent at home so far this season. There's 3 games, 9 points, 3 wins. So they're playing very well at Oakville View in the league so far. I did think the 5-1 scoreline flattered Stenhousemuir a little bit, but Annan we mentioned there that hat trick just completely collapsed in the second half, and it was they could have lost goals even before that. I think Ross Taylor was went on 1-1 with the goalkeeper. Really good tackle for Tam Muir to recover the situation. There's a ball played across the face of goal that no one could take advantage of. What I've seen from Stenny, and I think that it maybe ties in with the point when we were making the wider discussion about the league. I think that what we're seeing is there's nothing to be scared of. You can compete if you play well. You're hard and you're well organised. You can compete, and you've got to take advantage when the chances come. And Annan, just like I say, collapsed in that second half. They were really, really poor, really, really poor. And I think that it's one of those games where, like, on one hand, it's like you're delighted to see your team. Like, it's been about a year since Stenny scored 5 goals. The last time they scored 5 goals. And on one hand, you're like, well, listen, just see the game out, no injuries, let's get on the finishing line. But like, why you keep making substitutions? You're ruining this. You're ruining this game. You're killing the momentum. You're killing the flow by taking 5 players off. So it's funny, like after Blair Olsen scores, we get bored by the end of it just because nothing's happening. But there's perhaps the other 2 things to say about the game. It really did hang on a penalty save from Darren Jamieson, because Stenny were cruising. They'd opened the scoring from... Oh, who got the first goal in that match? I can't remember who got the first goal in that match. That said, Kenley Billum. Kenley Billum got the first goal in the match. He scored his first goal for the club. A really, really nice finish after... There goes my headphones back in there. Sorry, if you did, that was my headphones came out, so I was trying to put them back in. Kenley Billum opened the scoring, and then Michael Anderson got one. A terrible defending again. Max Kilsby got on just completely lost the flight of the ball, and basically Anderson just like nudged into him, sent him flying, and then chipped Smith. But they won a penalty from a handball inside the box. I think Ross Taylor handballed it. Aidan Smith stepped up and scored, and then 5 minutes later, Greg Buchanan headed through the back of someone, and they got another penalty. And at this point, you're thinking, geez, if they score this, that completely swings the game in their favour. But Darren Jamieson saved it, guessed right, pushed it away. Stenny got into half time, and then from the second half just went on and completely killed the game through Alston's goals. So it was a key moment from Darren Jamieson. But I've got to say, I keep talking about this guy every single time we discuss Stenhousemuir. Michael Anderson, unbelievable performance again. We said that, I'm sure any time we discussed him, we said if he could add goals to his game, you've got an absolutely superb midfield in your hands.
And now he has.
He's got 4 goals for the season now. That's him scored in consecutive weeks. He got 2 against Bucky. He's got 4 goals for the season. and he's had 2 goals in his previous 3 years for Stenny. So it really feels like he just gets better and better with every week, and he's someone that I really hope the club can tie down on a contract, because he's such a good player. And
do you think if he isn't tied down, then he will go to a higher level?
I suppose the thing for him is, I understand he's got quite a decent job outside football. Like, he's quite a young guy, and I think that what he is, you can move up the levels and you can make a bit of money. So I think for him, I can't say I know him that well, I'm just making assumptions, but I think for him it's just like football, something that he really loves doing, and he can make money from doing it. So it depends. It depends what he wants to do, I suppose. So we've got that luxury that he is, I wouldn't say ambitious, not ambitious, that's not the wrong word. I think like full-time football's not something that he's interested in, which augurs well for us, and I suppose that it's just creating an environment that he likes and wants to be a part of. I think he's got that at Stenhousemuir, and hopefully that continues. But if I was Gary Naismith, I'd be thinking about getting another contract down there, maybe adding a couple of extra zeros to how much he's getting already. Oh, he's good, man. He's really good.
I do think though that there is a certain amount of, I know it sounds silly, but there's a certain amount of jealousy of the fact that Stenny won the league for the very first time ever. And then I suppose there was maybe a bit of belief, I presume, from yourselves and fellow Stenny fans that maybe that's as good as it gets. That League One would be difficult or tricky or maybe even a sticky season. But now here we are, like 5 weeks in, it's like, actually,
yeah,
maybe we could go for it again.
Don't see why not. We're joint top at the moment. So.
Exactly. Like why not? Because I know you said that in terms of quality, I don't think quality in League One is that great this season. So maybe if they could avoid injuries and suspensions and things like that, maybe Stenny could do okay.
I'd like to think so. I remember saying a couple of weeks ago, I think it was after losing to Alloa, if you'd offered me 8th place, I'd take it. I'm maybe still of that mindset where I just think survival's the most important thing. However, you're coming up against like one of the teams that was favourite to win the league, and Arbroath at the start of the season very comfortably beat them. You take on a full-time team in Cove Rangers, and obviously Cove Rangers aren't a particularly good full-time team, but you nevertheless, they've got a certain advantage that Stenhousemuir don't have. They're quite comfortable against them. And then you take on the team who most people suspect that you'll be challenging to avoid bottom of the division with, and you're really comfortable against them. Really good second half performance. So there's a lot of positives there. So we'll see how it goes.
Fair play, and good luck to you.
Thank you. And we will drop into League One for our featured match. We're going to Methil, and we're going to talk about East Fife 5, Clyde 1. Shaughan, you and I spoke at length about Dick Campbell's team last week, but I think this was, we never really like talking about the same team twice unless it's Stenhousemuir, but this really was a result that was too big to ignore. 2 goals apiece from Nathan Austin and Alan Troughton, and a late strike from Adam Lareth gave the Fifers their 4th win on the spin, and Marley Redfern could only net a consolation for the Bully Wee. East Fife, 2nd place, a point behind Peterhead. Clyde are in 8th, and I think it's fair to say the season is not panning out like we expected. This is their 3rd defeat in the bounce, and the flaws that we'd seen against Stirling Albion and Bonnyrigg Rose were badly exposed here. This was a real dark afternoon for the Bully Wee.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of East Fife, I do think there is something in the air which I suppose you just expect the Campbells to eke out from a team. But in terms of Clyde, this looked like a performance. I mean, bear in mind when we spoke about Clyde last season, for maybe 6 months of the campaign, they were kind of laughably inept. But that kind of made sense because it felt like they had cobbled together, certainly at the start of the season, between June and January, for example. It kind of made sense because it looked like they had put together a side that just was not good enough for League Two. But now they have assembled a squad that is surely cost them 4 or 5 times more in terms of a budget. But this on Saturday looked like a performance that you would have expected from them at the start of last season. It was dreadful.
Yeah, absolutely dreadful. And I think this game the scoreline didn't flatter East Fife at all. East Fife looked really, really good. We'll come on and talk about them just shortly. I think we'll get into focus on Clyde. Didn't flatter East Fife at all, but just like all the constituent parts of Clyde, it just looked like completely malfunctioned. And on paper, I still believe Clyde have got the best group of players in League Two, and I still fancy them to win it. I do. I still fancy them to win it. Unless it's been a bad start, and we're not really seeing any evidence of that. I think the last time they actually played well was probably Partick Thistle.
Yep.
We're all talking about Logan Dunnicky turning into Didier Drogba. Well, he's turned into prime Didier.
He's just turned into Logan Dunnicky.
This is the Logan Dunnicky we all know and love. But since then, Clyde have been pretty mediocre, and just all the constituent parts. We talk about like a lack of balance within the team. McCall not finding. We said that McCall's probably got too many good players to pick from, and is really struggling to find a system where everyone's gelling together. And we've seen it. You know, the challenges they've had against Stirling Albion. So he tries something different against Bonnyrigg because that's a different challenge, and then he tries something different here against East Fife, and he got it so badly wrong here. Midfield was overrun. Defence, no one played well in defence. Like Paul Mackay had a really poor game here. I think there's a lot of stuff where he was involved in, where he was culpable for a lot of the goals. And just up front, nothing really seemed to stick for them.
It's interesting in terms of, like, I know we've spoken in the past about how it's quite unusual to see somebody go from part-time football as a manager and make a success of it in full-time football. And I do wonder if I would need to go away and look at it in terms of how many managers make a success of going from full-time football to part-time football. And I do wonder if maybe I'm just looking too much into it in terms of how Ian McCall is transitioning from a full-time manager to a part-time manager. But certainly, as of now, I know he kept them up, which was based on how much money they spent in January, what you would expect. It's certainly not working out at this moment in time. And you're right, I agree with you. Ultimately, surely it comes down to the fact that Clyde have a far better squad, I think, than anybody else in that division. So surely they come good. Surely they, whether it's a good result that they can kick on and it improves their morale, or whether Ian McCall eventually settles on a team, a starting 11 that they can kick on with. But Ian McCall's time as a part-time manager at Clyde has not been very good, ultimately.
No, I think you're right. If you want to, it's coming up for a year. That it's not far off a year. I think it's November, middle of November when he took charge of the job. And I think at that point you can say there's a degree of sympathy for him there because he's got a really poor hand to play with. Some of the guys that Jim Duffy and Brian McLean had signed were just not good enough for the SPFL. So he's got to move them on. And at the same token, so you've got to pay off these guys, and then you've got to sign guys of a higher calibre. And that's obviously going to cost a bit of money to get them to come down. I think guys like Lee Hamilton, for instance. No, he was leaving Edinburgh, and Edinburgh had their own financial problems. But there's just an example. So you've got to pay him a wee bit if you're to join a team at the bottom of the SPFL. And then, whilst he's signed all these pretty good players, got like Jordan Allen back in loan and so on, even then you're not necessarily seeing an improvement, but you can cut him some slack because the team needs time to gel. It's very difficult to try and turn over a team over a winter transfer window. So this is just like that. I think the idea was, let's get to the summer, let's make sure we're in the SPFL and let's go again. And he has been handsomely backed. He is, like we mentioned there, the calibre of the squad they've got handsomely backed. I think that most supporters at the beginning of the season seemed to be really happy and really enthusiastic about where the club were going, especially after that win against Partick Thistle. But then that just hasn't been borne out. Like a really dour draw against Forfar at the start of the season set the tone for what we're getting, and then it's just culminated with this absolute pumping here. And I think that McCall, there will be a lot of question marks over him because of, like, this is bad, but then when you extrapolate, you expand it back to last season, you're thinking, what good stuff has he actually done for Clyde? And I quite like Ian McCall. It's not to be critical of him, like, personally, but you're thinking, when you weigh up the credits and the debits, you're thinking, I'm not sure there's that many credits there.
Yeah, and I think they play Edinburgh next in terms of league fixtures. I think they play Edinburgh next, and then it might be something like Elgin, Spartans, and Peterhead. I think that completes their opening quarter.
That's a pretty minging run.
Yeah, and I mean, I don't know. But if they don't come out of that opening quarter with some kind of positivity or some kind of inclination that they are the favourites that everybody expected them to be, then I don't know, maybe it will be. I didn't expect that. At no point did I think that McCall's job would be in question, but I think it would be if they're still in this kind of run come game 9, for example.
Yeah, like the defence, like with Lee Hamilton playing out at fullback, that's not really helping because you're weakening the central defence, although Craig Howie and Paul Mackay on paper should be good enough to contest that level. I think that you've got Ray Grant and Andy Murdoch in the middle of the park there, both good players, quite similar players, I think, with what they want to do. And up front, you just seem to be changing it every week. The three in behind the striker and the striker, they seem to change on a game-by-game basis, so it's quite difficult to build up that degree of cohesion. And to compare it, I mean, if I want to compare it to my own team, like when Stenhousemuir were winning that league last season, and yes, they were fortunate with injuries, but you pitch up every week and you know what the starting 11 is going to be. Every week, the starting 11, you know that they're playing the same formation, and that degree of consistency, being one, as a fan, you've got that relationship with that 11. But then as players, you just build up cohesion and you build up an understanding, and that seems to be something that they just don't have at the moment.
I just think it's those forward positions. So in terms of Kyle Connell, in terms of Lee Connolly, in terms of Jordan Allen, I think if he can get a tune out of them, I think they'll be absolutely fine. I suppose in terms of Lee Connolly, maybe we're seeing why he is in League Two at this moment in time. Jordan Allen is a one. Surely, I'm not entirely sure why he has went from being somebody who Clyde fans were so keen to get back to the club based on the second half of last season to being somebody who's struggled so much this time around. And I think so much of that confidence of why Clyde were favourites for this league was their forward options, and actually all of them have ultimately been pretty disappointing so far.
Yeah, so we'll go on and we'll look at the goals there, because there's plenty to be excited about. Sadly, we didn't hear from Lee Gillies, the East Fife commentator. We didn't get another rendition of "How do you like them apples?" And it's a shame, because if there's ever a game that called for a "How do you like them apples," then this was it. But just like the goals that they lost, like I mentioned there about Paul Mackay having quite a difficult game. I mean, that the first goal they lost is like an Nathan Austin header, basically a free kick that goes into the box from Stuart Murdoch and Andy Munro. It's Paul Mackay that he gets the better of to head it into a space for Austin to attack. And there was a part as well where he got in ahead of Mackay. There was sorry. What I meant to say about Mackay, I sound like I'm giving him a hard time, but Austin got a real pop for his second goal of the game, where basically he's got the ball in the byline with his back to goal, and he turns in and cuts in and shoots into the net, and it's a stunning finish, and it's a really well taken goal. But how is he allowed on the byline, facing away from goal? How is he allowed to turn and run in? And it's Mackay that allows him to do it. Just keep him there, force him to pass the ball back to like a fullback or a centre back at the halfway line, and then reorganise there. But it allows him to turn and then come inside and shoot. And it's a shot. I don't think anyone's expecting him to shoot from there, but it's like Nathan Austin's he's playing really, really well at the moment. Don't let him do that kind of thing. Yeah,
I kind of felt like defensively, I felt like a kind of lack of responsibility and accountability, and you can probably get away with that to a degree as long as you communicate effectively. But it didn't really feel like that was happening at any point for this game either.
And the fourth goal was Alan Troughton's second goal. It's like when you see it at first, it's really quite well worked, particularly between Laref and Conor McManus. I think Laref plays them in, and McManus chips a really nice ball towards the back post. But you see it on the reverse angle. East Fife highlights are really, really good again. Yeah. But when you see it on the angle behind the goals, like Troughton, there's no one near him. It's such an easy goal for him to score. But it's an easy goal like I could have scored it. It's don't mark me. I can score the goal. But it's just like, how on earth are you allowed to? I mean, I know you've been caught out because it's a nice interplay between Raith and McManus. But even then, like somebody just ambling towards the 6-yard box with a free header.
It gave the impression, and I'm sure it isn't the case, but it very much gave the impression. As a fan, I would be suggesting that Clyde had chucked it by that point. And that's never a good thing to suggest, but that's how it looked.
Yeah, I mean, then like Raith got, I think it was his first goal for the club as well. It was actually quite a smart finish. The ball breaks favourably to him, and he just sticks out a leg and diverts it into the net. But yeah, if I was a Clyde fan, I would be very anxious. And it must be shit, because after, like, since the Danny Lennon's team that got promoted, when was that, 2019?
Yep.
That team got promoted to a really, really good team. This is the best team they've had since then, and on paper, and with that pre-season, you'd be like, yeah, we've got a really good chance of winning the league, but you're miles behind already. What, they 9 points behind Peterhead already? I mean, that's not insurmountable. Still plenty of football to be played, but you'd be absolutely dismayed at this stage.
I think there's an argument that this squad is better than the team that won, or certainly they got promoted from League 2 last time around. I know they had David Goodwillie the last time they came up from this division, but just in terms of a kind of quality dispersal throughout that starting 11, it feels like a far better team. But here we are again, where they are started abysmally.
Yeah, and you've got to give a lot of credit to East Fife, particularly to Nathan Austin and Alan Troughton. Austin is just in astonishing form at the moment. That's 9 goals for the season already, 7 goals in his last 4 games. And just in this match, he used it a lot, just like, even when he wasn't scoring, he was still influencing the play. I mean, just an example of it. There's a ball that's played down in towards the channel there, and Brian Kinnear just ambles out from his goal to get it and tries to, like, very slowly dribble it back into his box. Austin, just through sheer force of will, just chases him down. Kinnear tries to speed up, then falls in the ball outside the box and gives away a free kick. But that's just from Austin just like hassling, and you don't need to do that. You know, you can conserve your energy, because it's obviously like Brian Kinnear's still going to pick up the ball and nothing daft's going to happen with it. But just by doing that at that stage of the game, you can make things happen. And like any time he was in the ball, something was going to happen there.
Aye, and it's actually class to kind of watch him like this again, because we've spoken in the past about players who maybe go to the lower league or whatever, and it's like, oh, that's disappointing. But even like Austin had he had that time at Kelty where he wasn't really getting a game. Now, I don't know why that was. Maybe he wasn't fit. Maybe he'd had a fallout with a manager. Still in the SPFL, but not getting a game. And you did wonder, well, maybe time's just not on his side now. Maybe he is going to fizzle out as an SPFL player. So I was tentatively excited, I suppose, when he went back to East Fife, but just watched him again in kind of full flow and full flight. It's very, very exciting.
Yeah, very exciting. And you talk about goals changing games there. I mean, there was like Clyde getting a penalty, getting one back from the spot, Marley Redfern scoring that penalty, but like 2 minutes later, that's when he scores that. It's not just a goal, but it's an absolutely stunning goal as well. And then he's involved as well for the other goals as well, involved with Laref's goal. And you've got to give him credit. You've got to give Alan Troughton a lot of credit as well. That's 8 goals in 9 appearances so far this season for Alan Troughton. And it's great. I mean, what's he, 37? Brilliant.
Yeah.
Best penalty taker in Scotland.
Is it Austin has got the most goals in the SPFL, and Troughton might be second, something like that? Or maybe like right? 2 of the top 3, something like that.
That's probably 38 years old. Alan Troughton is 38 years old. Just a great career. Would I put him down as one of the best in the SPFL of my lifetime? Maybe that's something maybe that's a discussion for another day. But just a phenomenal player, and someone as well who you think you get to that age, you might be slowing down a bit. I don't think Alan Troughton was ever particularly quick, No, I suppose he was quite quick when he was in that Brecon team. He's obviously slowed down a wee bit, but when some players, they rely on pace, when that goes, they don't have much else to work with. But he's obviously got a lot to work with, just ultimately a very, very good football player. Yeah, and
again, somebody who's good to watch and having a very, very good start to this season.
Aye, brilliant. Aye, well done to East Fife. I think they look good. There's one final thing to say about them. There was the post-match interview with Ian Campbell. There's a bit where the interviewer's like talking to him about the positive aspects of the second half performance, and Campbell's like, "Yep, spot on." Just agreeing with him, everything the guy was saying. I just thought that was quite funny.
Was there a question where I think I missed the question, but I think he might have said, "Was there anybody that you particularly wanted to single out?" And then Ian Campbell literally goes through the entire team. He was like, "Well, I thought the centre halves, the goalkeeper, very good. In terms of fullbacks, thought they were excellent. In terms of wide players, they were great. In terms of midfielders, very good. And in terms of the final third, I thought that was excellent." He went through the entire starting 11.
They're doing well at the moment, East Fife. I remember thinking that there'd be a lot more movement in terms of players this summer because they didn't have a particularly good season last year, and I thought Campbell would have wanted to clear the decks almost. I don't think there was that much done, maybe about 5 or 6 in, same number out, but he's done well, certainly rejuvenated them, and they do look like they're challengers for that title.
Yeah, I thought they needed far more kind of new blood if they were going to be a kind of title challenger, but I suppose like we know they just like the Campbells ultimately generally have a positive effect on wherever they kind of pitch up, so maybe we shouldn't be that surprised.
Fair enough, Shaughan. And finally, we started this podcast by talking about a manager coming in. We'll finish the podcast by a manager leaving, and that's Scott Agnew, resigned as the manager of Stranraer. His team have taken just 2 points from the 5 games this season, and they were defeated by Bonnyrigg Rose at the weekend, going down 2-0, with Scott Agnew resigning the next day. Did you watch his post-match interview from this game?
Yeah,
he sounded really. I think it was Lawrence Nelson, who's wearing a Bang Bang Darren Lang t-shirt. Said, "What a worker, company man, absolute company man." But I think it was him that said to him, "You sound down rather than angry," and it felt. Though I mean, it's easy to say in hindsight, but it felt listening to him was that there were a lot of problems and he didn't necessarily have the answers to them. Yeah,
I mean, to be fair, like I listened to the interview after he had resigned. But I suppose it probably was one of the more predictable kind of managerial changes, I suppose. I mean, you think back to that win over East Kilbride, and it felt like that maybe there was a bit of a momentum in terms of supporters getting involved or sponsors getting involved, and in terms of the turnover of the squad. And you thought, right, well, hopefully they can tap into that, and at the very least they can have a stress-free season. And as much as I still think that Edinburgh are the kind of favourites to finish 10th, everything you've seen of Stranraer so far would suggest that they're kind of struggling again. And after being so close to dropping out of league last time around, they really can't take. Like they have to do something, I suppose, to change things.
And I suppose it's fair play. I think that's a measure of Agnew's character, that he recognised that he wasn't the person that was able to change it.
Yes.
Some people will stick around in those circumstances because just pig-headedness, or they believe they'll get a payout if they're sacked or whatever. But for him to just admit that I can't do any more and step down, I think that's a measure of him. And I think that everyone associated with Stranraer will just be disappointed that it didn't go anywhere. I don't think anyone will feel angry towards him. I think it will just be disappointment that he wasn't able to get the best out of a club that mean a lot to him. He's a really, really good player at Stranraer, and there's loads of good people at Stranraer. I feel as though we know them through the highlights package, through the work of Lawrence Nelson and Brian Martin. You feel as though you know them, so that it feels like in terms of clubs, you kind of know what you're dealing with more so than any other team. Yeah. So that'll be a sore one.
I mean, I think I do get the impression he's popular, even though they've went through like a really difficult time for a long period of time. I still felt that Agnew was popular, but I wasn't surprised at that decision. You're right, fair play to him, and good luck to him in terms of whatever comes in the future, and hopefully, because I think we're both have a real soft spot for Stranraer, so hopefully they appoint a successful manager soon.
I think in our big preview podcast, which if you haven't listened to it, please go and give it a go. I think in our preview podcast, I said that he might be the first manager in League Two to walk away or whatever it was, and sadly I was proven to be correct in that. A broken clock does tell the correct time twice a day.
Well, there you go. Well done, you.
Yes, I fucking Nostradamus here. And people remember that Nostradamus got a lot of things wrong.
Lots. I would say more wrong than correct.
Yeah, I mean, if you... Mystic Meg's dead, isn't she?
I don't know, but she wasn't good at predicting the lottery. That was my take on Mystic Meg.
But did add a degree of spice to it though, didn't it? Mystic Meg just saying absolute trash.
I remember, so the lottery started when I was about 16, and so she used to get wheeled out before the lottery, and she would talk about who would be successful that week, and she would say things like, I see success in red, and I would run up the stairs before the draw and put on a red jacket, just in case.
And then you realise that you'd forgot to put a ticket on.
Then I realised she was an absolute charlatan.
This was probably it's quite cryptic though, isn't it? I mean, it's not literally somebody wearing red. It could be death or something like that. You ever seen Don't Look Now? Could have been something to do with that.
What was Don't Look Now again?
Don't Look Now is the wee girl in the red jacket.
Oh yeah,
Donald Sutherland
gets killed at the end.
And it turns out she kind of looks like Tony Anderson a wee bit. Tony, if you're listening, go and watch the Donald Sutherland death scene. Don't Look Now. Shaughan, I think this is probably as good a. That's probably just like Don't Look Now finishes at that period. It's probably a good time for us to wrap up this podcast as well. Shaughan, we are going to record a bonus podcast for our Patreon subscribers. We reached out and asked them to send us in some questions, and we're going to answer them. A couple of interesting ones in there, and it could be some fun. If you want to listen to it, you're going to have to subscribe to our Terrace Patreon, and for just as little as £2 per month, you can access hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of podcasts on an array of topics. There's hours and hours of content there. Now, it's Challenge Cup weekend. No one's really fussed about that. We might cover it next week, but we probably won't.
Yeah, agreed.
We'll find something to talk about. We always do. So until then, please do enjoy your football, but unlike Dougie Emery in his comments towards referee Graham Granger, please do so respectfully. Man who gave away millions of fouls. The impossible. I wonder, if anyone's good at arithmetic, let me know how many fouls you would have to, or not, how many fouls you'd have to make per second to get a million fouls into a game.
I mean, it would be 112,000 fouls every 10 minutes. Is that right?
Let's get the calculator. This is a really bizarre way to finish this podcast, doing some arithmetic. But there's 90 minutes in a game of football divided by 1 million. Okay, that's the number of years. No, I've done that wrong.
No, it'll be a million divided. The million divided by 9.
You would have to commit a foul every 0.00009 seconds for a million fouls to happen in a game of football.
Dougie, you're a slaver.
Take care. Goodbye.